A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. So Daniel sent us this one. And it hits close to home for anyone who's ever tried to be a bit more self-reliant or just wanted to charge their gear at the beach. He writes, "Those of us who live in sunny climates may have had the experience of buying a solar panel that promised to output USB Type-C to charge headphones, only to find that it didn't really work. These solar panel chargers are also staples of the preparedness world. However, they are often very unreliable. Is it possible to buy good quality ones, or are these inherently unreliable?"
Herman Poppleberry here, and man, Daniel is poking a very specific, very frustrating bruise with this one. It is the classic Amazon expectation versus reality trap, but with higher stakes because, as he mentioned, people buy these for emergency kits. You don't want to find out your life-saving gear is a plastic brick when the grid actually goes down. Imagine being in a situation where the power has been out for 48 hours, your emergency radio is dead, and you're standing in the backyard holding a folding panel toward the sun like a ritual sacrifice, only to have it do absolutely nothing.
It's that classic $20 impulse buy. You see the folding panels, the green LEDs, the USB-C power delivery logo plastered all over the thumbnail, which is probably photoshopped, and you think, great, I'll never be out of juice again. Then you actually get it out in the sun, plug in your phone, and it just blinks at you. Or worse, your phone battery actually goes down while it's plugged in. By the way, fun fact for everyone listening, Google Gemini 3 Flash is actually writing our script today, so if we sound extra enlightened, you know why. It's analyzing our patterns to make sure we don't wander too far off into the weeds, though I think Herman can wander into the weeds all on his own without any AI assistance.
Hopefully, Gemini knows it's electrical engineering, because the why behind these failures is actually fascinating. It isn't usually the solar cells themselves that are the problem. Silicon is pretty reliable at turning photons into electrons. If you have a decent monocrystalline cell, it's going to generate a current as long as there's light. The failure is almost entirely in the brain of the charger, that little plastic box where the USB ports live. It's a fundamental collision between the physics of solar power and the very picky digital logic of the USB-C protocol. You're trying to marry an analog, fluctuating energy source from the Mesozoic era to a hypersensitive microchip from 2024.
Right, because USB-C isn't just a dumb pipe anymore. Back in the day, with the old USB-A rectangles, you just shoved 5 volts down the line and the device took what it could get. It was like a garden hose. If the pressure dropped, the water just came out slower. But USB-C is more like a high-speed rail negotiation. It's constantly checking the connection to make sure it's safe to send higher wattages.
That is a perfect way to frame it. USB-C power delivery, or PD, requires a digital handshake. When you plug in your phone, the charger and the phone have a conversation over the configuration channel pins, the CC pins. The phone says, "I can take 9 volts at 3 amps," and the charger says, "I can only give you 5 volts at 2 amps, and they agree on a contract. The problem is that solar energy is inherently unstable. A cloud passes by, a bird flies over, or a tree branch casts a tiny shadow, and the pressure in that hose drops instantly. Even a shadow covering just 5% of the panel's surface area can drop the voltage by 50% or more because of how the cells are wired in series.
And in the world of USB-C logic, if that pressure drops below the negotiated contract, the handshake doesn't just slow down, it breaks. The phone thinks it's been unplugged because the voltage dipped below the threshold required by the power delivery specification.
Well, not exactly. I shouldn't say that. But that is the core mechanism. When the sun comes back out a second later, the panel tries to renegotiate. It sends a signal saying, "Hey, I'm back." Your phone screen wakes up, which uses power, by the way. It does the little ding sound, they try to shake hands again, and then another cloud comes. If this happens every 30 seconds, you're actually net losing power because the phone is constantly waking up its processor and screen to deal with the new charger connection. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a leaky faucet that only turns on when you're looking at it.
It's like trying to have a serious business negotiation with someone who hangs up the phone every time a car honks outside. You spend more time redialing than actually talking business. So, Daniel's asking if they're all inherently unreliable. Is it just a bad idea to have a USB-C port directly on a folding solar panel? Is the technology just not mature enough to handle the bypass?
It's not a bad idea in theory, but it's very difficult to execute cheaply. To do it right, you need a sophisticated controller chip that handles what we call intelligent auto restart. High-end brands like Big Blue or Goal Zero, and we've talked about Goal Zero's ecosystem before in passing, they put circuitry in there that detects these sags. Instead of letting the phone and the panel get stuck in a zombie state where they're connected but not charging, the chip waits for the voltage to stabilize, then mimics a physical unplug and replu event to force a clean handshake. Cheap $20 panels from brands with names like X Dragon Power Max usually don't have that. They just use the cheapest linear regulator possible and hope the sun stays perfectly still.
Let's talk about those linear regulators, because I think that's where the marketing lie. Daniel mentioned really starts to show. If I buy a 28-watt panel, I'm expecting 28 watts, but you're telling me I'm lucky to get half that. How do they even get away with putting 28 watts on the box if it can't actually do it?
On a good day. Think about the math. A folding solar panel usually outputs between 12 and 18 volts raw from the cells, but USB needs 5 volts, or maybe 9 or 12 if it's doing fast charging. A cheap linear regulator basically burns off the extra voltage as heat to get it down to 5 volts. It's incredibly wasteful. If you're dropping 18 volts down to 5, you are literally wasting nearly 70% of your captured energy as heat before it even touches the cable. It's like buying a gallon of milk but having to pour out 3/4 of it into the sink before you can put it in your cereal.
So the panel is getting hot, not just from the sun, but from its own inefficiency. That's a death spiral, because don't solar cells get less efficient as they get hotter? I remember reading that for every degree above 25 Celsius, you lose a certain percentage of output.
They do. It's the sunny climate paradox, Daniel pointed out. In a place like Arizona or Israel where Daniel is, the ambient heat is already pushing the cells past their ideal operating temperature. The cells themselves can easily reach 60 or 70 degrees Celsius in direct sun. Then you add the heat from a cheap, inefficient voltage regulator located right in that little plastic junction box, and suddenly your 28-watt panel is struggling to output 5 watts. And if your modern smartphone requires a minimum of 15 watts to even initiate a fast charge handshake, it'll just look at that 5-watt trickle and say, "No thanks, I'm not even going to try." It treats the charger like a dirty power source and refuses to engage.
This explains why my headphones might charge, because they only need a tiny bit of current, maybe half an amp, but my iPad just sits there with a not charging notification. It's not that the panel is broken, it's just that it's too weak to meet the minimum entry requirements for the USB-C club. It's like trying to enter a high-stakes poker game with a pocket full of nickels. The bouncer isn't going to let you in.
And there's an even dirtier secret in the manufacturing. A lot of these USB-C ports on generic panels aren't actually USB-C. They are just the old USB-A, dumb, circuits with a different plastic shape on the end. They lack the 5.1 kilo ohm resistors on the CC pins that tell a device, "Hey, I am a power source." Without those resistors, an iPhone or a high-end Android phone will see the cable but won't pull any power because it can't verify what's on the other end. It's a safety feature that the cheap panels just ignore to save 5 cents on the bill of materials. They figure most people won't know the difference. They'll just assume their phone is being temperamental.
It's engineering theater. It looks like a USB-C port. It fits a USB-C cable, but it's just a facade. It's like a movie set where the front of the building looks great, but there's nothing behind the door. So if I'm in the preparedness world and I'm building a go bag and I put one of these in there, I'm essentially carrying dead weight. If the time comes to actually use it, I'm going to be stranded with a dead phone and a very expensive sunshade.
Precisely, wait, I promise not to say precisely. Let's look at the numbers. In a 3-day power outage, you might have 8 hours of usable sun. With a cheap panel, between the heat losses, the handshake failures, and the lack of an auto restart chip, you might spend those 8 hours and only gain 10% battery on your phone. That's a failure. You've spent the most valuable part of your day tending to a device that provides almost zero return on investment.
So what is the solution? Is it just buy the expensive one, or is there a better architectural way to do this? Daniel mentioned a buffer battery solution. Does that actually fix the handshake problem or just hide it?
That is the pro move, and honestly, the only way I'd trust solar in a real emergency. Instead of trying to charge your sensitive, picky $2,400 smartphone directly from a fluctuating nuclear furnace in the sky, you charge a dumb power bank first. Power banks are generally much more tolerant of variable current. They don't have screens that wake up, they don't have complex operating systems that need to negotiate a contract every time a cloud moves. They just have a basic charging circuit that takes whatever milliamps the panel can shove into them.
Right, so the power bank acts like a reservoir. It smooths out the ripples of the solar energy. If the sun dips, the power bank doesn't complain. It just fills up a little bit slower. Then, once the power bank has some juice, you plug your phone into the bank. The bank provides a rock-solid, stable USB-C PD signal that your phone loves because it's coming from a steady battery, not a flickering star.
It decouples the physics problem from the logic problem, and it solves the heat issue too. You can leave the panel and the power bank out in the sun. Power banks handle heat a bit better than phones do, though you should still shade them and keep your phone inside or in the shade. One of the biggest reasons direct-to-device solar fails is that people leave their phone right under the panel. The phone hits 45 degrees Celsius. The internal thermal protection kicks in, and it stops charging to prevent the battery from exploding. The user sees not charging and blames the solar panel, but it's actually the phone protecting itself from the sun. Lithium batteries and direct sunlight are a recipe for a chemical fire.
I love that. I'm trying to give you energy. No, you're trying to melt me. It's a total communication breakdown. I was actually looking at some of these panels recently, and I noticed they all have these insane 40,000 milliamp hour ratings, but the panel itself is only the size of a notebook. How does that work? Is there some new battery technology I don't know about?
It doesn't. That's another marketing lie. If you see a small foldable panel that claims to have a 40,000 mAh battery built in, they are usually lying about the capacity or using the lowest quality cells imaginable. A real 40,000 mAh battery would weigh nearly 2 pounds on its own. If the whole charger weighs 10 ounces, the math doesn't check out. They're often using nominal capacity at the cell level, not usable capacity at the output. After you account for the DC to DC conversion losses, which are huge in cheap electronics, you're lucky to get 60% of what's on the label. It's pure fiction designed to catch the eye of a shopper who is just looking for the biggest number.
It's the Wild West of electronics. There's no accountability. You mentioned UL 2743 earlier, the safety standard for portable power. I'm guessing most of these Amazon specials wouldn't even know where to find the UL testing lab. Do they even bother with testing, or is it just factory to consumer with zero oversight?
Sadly, that's true. I did a deep dive into some listings recently, and about 3% of the portable solar chargers on the major marketplaces actually have a valid UL file number. Many of them just put a CE or RoHS logo on the box and call it a day, but those are self-certifications. They don't mean a third-party lab actually verified that the thing won't catch fire if it gets too hot in the sun. They are essentially stickers that say, "Trust us." And in the world of high amperage lithium charging, trust is a dangerous currency.
Which is a real possibility. You're talking about a device designed to sit in direct, intense sunlight while processing high amperage electricity through cheap Chinese capacitors. That is a recipe for a very bad day. So, Daniel's question, is it possible to buy good quality ones? If we move past the junk, what does a good one actually look like under the hood?
It is, but you have to look for specific engineering markers. First, look for maximum power point tracking, or MPPT, even in the smaller controllers. Most cheap foldables use PWM pulse width modulation, which is basically just a fast on-off switch. It's inefficient because it doesn't match the panel's output to the battery's needs. MPPT is like a continuously variable transmission for your power. It finds the sweet spot, where the panel is most efficient and stays there, even as the light changes. Second, check if the manufacturer explicitly mentions Intelligent Auto Restart. If they don't brag about that feature, they probably don't have it. It's a premium feature because it requires extra logic chips.
And don't look at the wattage on the box as gospel. If a panel is advertised as 14 watts, treat it like a 7-watt panel. If it's 28 watts, treat it like 14. Always over spec. If you need to charge a modern smartphone that wants 18 watts of USB-C PD, you probably need a 60-watt foldable panel just to ensure you have enough overhead for when things get warm or a little hazy. You want headroom. You never want to be running your solar setup at its absolute theoretical limit.
And honestly, check the physical construction. Good panels use ETFE, ethylene tetrafluoroethylene, which is a high-strength polymer that doesn't yellow or crack in the sun. It has a slightly dimpled texture that helps trap more light at different angles. Cheap ones use PET, the same stuff soda bottles are made of. PET is smooth and shiny, but it will degrade and delaminate after one summer of heavy use. If the listing says long-lasting ETFE coating, that's usually a sign that they're at least trying to build a quality product. It shows they care about the longevity of the cells, not just the initial sale.
This reminds me of when we talked about the charger graveyard in the past, that drawer full of unbranded bricks. These solar panels are just the outdoor version of that. They're e-waste in waiting. You buy it, you use it once, it fails to charge your phone fast enough, and it ends up in the back of a closet until the battery inside swells up and you have to throw it away. It's a massive waste of resources for a product that doesn't even fulfill its primary promise.
It's a shame because the technology is actually there. We've seen GaN gallium nitride start to move into this space. We talked about GaN in the USB-C context before. Using GaN in the solar controller would make it much more efficient and much cooler. It would allow for much smaller junction boxes that don't overheat. But right now the market is so driven by race to the bottom pricing that nobody wants to put a $10 GaN chip in a $30 solar panel. The consumer sees two panels that look identical, and they're going to pick the cheaper one every time, not realizing the expensive one actually works.
So, practical takeaways for Daniel and everyone else. If you live in a sunny place or you're building an emergency kit, step 1, forget the all-in-one solar power banks. You know the ones. The little bricks with a tiny solar panel on one side about the size of a credit card. Those are a joke.
Total theater. To charge a 20,000 mAh battery using a panel that small would take about 2 weeks of perfect 24-hour sun. Since the sun only stays up for 12 hours, you're looking at a month of charging just to get one phone fill-up. It's a gimmick. In fact, leaving those in the sun can actually damage the internal battery because of the heat. You're literally cooking the battery to get a trickle of energy.
Step 2. Get a dedicated folding panel from a reputable brand. Big Blue, Anchor, Goal Zero, Renogy. Look for ETFE coating, an MPPT or auto restart. And step 3, the sandwich method. Panel charges the power bank charges the phone. Never go direct unless it's an absolute emergency and you're standing there watching the screen to make sure it doesn't loop. Is there any scenario where going direct is better?
Maybe if you have a dumb device, like a simple rechargeable flashlight or a very old phone that doesn't use USB-C PD. But for anything modern, use a buffer and test it now. Don't wait for the hurricane or the blackout. Take your panel out on a Tuesday at noon, plug in your phone, and see what happens. If you see that charging icon flickering, or if the phone gets too hot to touch, you know your system is flawed. I'd even recommend getting a $10 USB-C multimeter. It's a little dongle that shows you the actual voltage and amperage going through the line. It's the only way to cut through the marketing fluff.
I love the idea of a USB-C multimeter as a standard part of a prep kit. It's the only way to know if your free energy is actually doing anything, or if you're just sun-drying your electronics. It gives you an objective measurement. If you see the panel is only outputting 3 watts when it promised 20, you have your answer right there on the little LCD screen.
Oh, I said it. I'm sorry. I'm a donkey of my word, and I failed. I've been trying to cut that word out of my vocabulary, but it's the perfect verbal punctuation for a technical point. But the point stands. Information is power, especially when you're dealing with variable power. If you don't know what's coming out of that port, you're just guessing.
It's okay, Ermin. I'll let it slide this once because you're being so helpful. But seriously, the preparedness industry is full of this kind of looks good on paper junk. It's all about the promise of the technology, not the reality of the physics. We're essentially paying for a sense of security that disappears the moment the sun goes behind a cloud. It's psychological comfort rather than actual electrical utility.
And as we move into a world where everything is USB-C, this is only going to get more complicated. We're seeing the USB-C PD 4.0 spec with adjustable voltage supply. That might actually help in the future, allowing the panel to negotiate in real time as the sun fluctuates without breaking the connection. It would allow the device to say, okay, give me whatever you have between 5 and 20 volts, and adjust on the fly. But we're not there yet in the consumer portable space. We're still stuck in the negotiate or die phase of the protocol.
For now, it's a game of buyer beware. If it's under $40 and it claims to be a high-speed USB-C solar charger, it's probably lying to you. Spend the extra money, get the buffer battery, and keep your gear in the shade. It's the difference between having a toy you can rely on and a toy that fails you when you need it most.
And maybe keep a backup dumb USB. A cable around. Sometimes when the smart handshake fails, the dumb 5-volt trickle is the only thing that will get you through the night. It's slow, but slow is better than zero.
A rare moment where being dumber is actually an advantage. I can relate to that. Well, this has been a deep dive into the frustrations of solar USB-C. Thanks to Daniel for the prompt. Hope Ezra is doing well and that you've got a better charging setup than the ones we just roasted. I'm going to go check my own emergency kit now and see if I've been fooled by a X-Dragon panel.
Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flemingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. Without them, we'd be trying to run this podcast on a folding solar panel, and we'd probably cut out every time a pigeon flew over the studio.
This has been my Weird Prompts. If you're enjoying these deep dives into the tech that usually just annoys us, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It really helps the algorithm find more people who are equally curious about voltage sags and silicon handshakes. We love hearing from you, so keep those prompts coming in.
You can find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe. We've got a whole backlog of technical deep dives and philosophical rants waiting for you.
Stay charged, stay in the shade, and we'll talk to you next time.
See ya.
This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We shake.